Hello, Tiffany, and welcome to Ideas with Imka podcast. I'm so excited to have you on here today and talk about your journey and talk about what you do and finding a little bit more, about Ayurveda and how you incorporate that in your life.
Oh, thank you so much, Alexandra, for having me. Thank you. And I'm really touched to see the podcast that you've created and to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Super exciting. So, Tiffany, let's start dive in. And what I would like to ask you is, can you share more about your journey and how did you end up living in India and Thailand in your early 20s, and how these experiences um, living abroad shape your path towards becoming a I guess a international teacher in Ayurvedic practice and so on.
Yeah, it's funny, Alexandra, that you asked me this. It's timely because recently I've been creating something that's come from requests, which is an ongoing mentorship program for people
Mm.
in all things Vedas, like yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, etc. And with that, many people were asking me exactly this question about my journey, how I ended up really infused and living out and connecting to and studying and retreating in this tradition or in these traditions. And so it's brought me into a self-reflective process also. You know,
Mm.
the simplest answer is I have no idea how. Like I have no idea how this journey happened.
The flow of
Like
life, right?
right? Like most of our journeys. And I had a beautiful Ayurvedic teacher, Vaidya, who was a real inspiration for me. And he used to say, how many of you, and especially many of us were Western practitioners studying to become doctors, he'd say, how many of you in high school or when you were young and the teacher asked you to draw what you were going to be or to say what you were going to be when you'd
Mm.
grow up, said, I'm going to be an Ayurvedic doctor. Or I'm going to be, a meditation practitioner and teacher.
Yeah.
So this, it also lays my heart to a place of great mystery and awe for the unknown. To say, like, yes, I can account for the journey, like I can share with you, which I think is touching in its own right,
Mm.
as all our lives' journeys are. And I find that also when I sit with other people and hear their life story, I just am really touched so often. And there's so much wonder about how we end up where we end up.
Mm.
But more than the story, it's like it really opens me continuously to this mystery of our lives and the blessing of what it is to just live out even the journey rather than really the place that we get to. So my journey, of course, began in a very I say of course, but like many of us started in a very humble way in which I grew up in rural Canada. And I was not exposed in any way to any of these things. It's not like I had parents or a surrounding community or grew up in an urban environment where there was even exposure
Mm.
to the Vedic tradition or really to much spirituality. But on the very corner of this teeny tiny place where I grew up, which was about 20 people, it was a little hamlet in rural Ontario, there was a church. And I was an only child. So I used to go to the church for various things. I'd go to the church to like practice sports against the church, throw a ball. I had no one to throw a ball with. I mean, it sounds a bit malaiseful, but it was like the church. I befriended this church. And I used to go to the church for community also.
Yeah.
And there was some kind of sense that there was something to be touched into there. And although the mode of practice, what we might call Christianity, and it was a united church, so it was very welcoming in many ways, didn't necessarily always touch the depths of my heart, there was something that I always felt to come back to there. So Sunday school, and then later, connecting there. And then, of course, like many of us, I fell away from it. But the
Mm.
life had from its earliest moments that I can remember, Alexandra, this yearning around inquiry. Like, what is
Mm.
this life for? Who are we? What's the purpose
Mm.
of this life? And really on a very stark and sober level, like, what does it mean to live and to die? I also had this connection with death
Mm.
and a wonderment around that as well. And so that sort of fed and was a thread throughout my life. And when I went to university, I studied philosophy, and also I studied international development studies. And
Hmm.
that brought me to work in other countries in the field of development. But at that time, I was working more with seeds, indigenous seed saving, and working with biopiracy, and really inspired around the land and the seeds that Prakriti, that nature offers us. And because of that seed of working in that field, I ended up in Mexico, and there were encounterings with beings that just brought deep questioning around
Hmm.
existence. And that led me to India. And I actually went to India to work for an organization that worked with indigenous seed saving, that had seed banks, that worked with women's cooperatives around the country to really reinstill the recognition of organic and natural farming. And that was very close to a city in the north of India, which is called Rishikesh, which is really the hub and known as the international hub of yoga and meditation. And I went there for a weekend, Alexandra, and then I didn't leave for 4 years. So that's what happened.
And the rest of it's history, right?
And the rest really is its history. And it's an ongoing living history, because even to this moment, I continue to study and go back to India.
Mhm.
I used to spend about half my years after those 4 years, spend about half the year in India. And now I get a few months each year. Like this year, I'll be there in the fall. Again, I'll be there October, November. And I was there earlier in the year. So I
Mhm.
still spend a good amount of time infused and really in
Mhm.
the motherland of the Vedas.
Right,
So
right.
that's sort of how the journey began. It found me. It was like drinking pure spring water. The first
Hmm.
time I came into contact with the depth of the teachings of yoga, meditation, and then Ayurveda, consequentially.
Hmm. So this is something that, like the Ayurveda part of it, is you start discovering when you were in India.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
When I was here, because see, I was there in my early 20s was the first time I went. So I don't know that I'd had any exposure yet to Ayurveda. I'd had
Mhm.
exposure to yoga. I was a figure skater, and so we did off ice various practices. So I had exposure to yoga as a stretching practice,
Okay.
not the
Yes, yoga back then
spirituality
was
of it.
completely different than it is right now, right? Here,
Completely
at
different.
least in North America.
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah.
yes, while I was there, I went to an Ayurvedic doctor or two, but it didn't nip me right away. It didn't take me right away. I thought, oh, it's a beautiful compliment, and my path was really in deep commitment to the silence of being and also to awakening. And so
Hmm.
I was really just in the commitment to meditation and yoga. And then after some years, Ayurveda started to enter in more and more deeply. It was like a call, a real call of life.
Hmm.
And still to this day, I find that people associate and think of
Hmm.
me more, as an Ayurvedic practitioner or doctor
Hmm.
than they might as a meditation teacher. But
Hmm.
both are really, they're very present in my life, and other things as well, as you know. But
So Ayurveda is a part of life, isn't it?
yes, I mean, Ayurveda, even if we look at the etymology, what it means, it really means Ayurveda, which it means Veda, which is the knowledge of or the science of, and
Hmm.
Ayur, which is life. So to know our lives, to know what it is to be alive,
Hmm.
alive and in this life.
Yeah.
And when I really started to understand the depth of Ayurveda, not just that it was for this physical body, although that's part of it, because this is
Hmm.
part of our form and part of what it is to exist in life. When I really started to understand its depths, that's when I gained a real honoring for it as well, and a love for it, and deepened my
Hmm.
studies.
Hmm. So these teachings influence your approach to what you do today.
Absolutely, in so
Mm.
many ways. We have an Ayurvedic clinic here in the beautiful hills where you and I live,
Yes.
in these beautiful Gatineau hills in Quebec. And so I see people in person here, but I also see a lot of people online. So
Mm.
through
Yeah.
consultations, and I take people in groups for Panchakarma to India, and we have pilgrimages, various things. And then we have our clinical side of things, but I also have a whole education side of things. So I teach
Mm.
courses, and I have a mentorship and a membership program so people can deepen, for practitioners and for people just really common people in our lives, for our
Right.
families and our communities and
Or
ourselves. And
looking for the change or looking to
absolutely.
better their lives, or like you said, having that kind of awakening moment in their life, being like, okay,
Yes.
let's dive in and see what we can do to better our lives, or
Yes.
either it's spiritually or whatever it is, right? And I think, again,
Absolutely.
we've had so many conversation with other people that right now, and I think it happened since COVID, there is a huge shift right now on this planet,
Yes.
and people are looking for that change. Either it is mental change or some sort of physical or health, spiritual, anything. I think people are
Yes.
really searching for this. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. The promise of the conventional life,
Mm,
the promise of capitalism, the promise of democracy, the
mhm.
promise of the 9 to 5 job, the
Right.
promise of the new world, all of these things people are seeing through at this point and are quite disheartened around, I would say. And is this a bad thing? It does lead to use that word again, a starkness maybe in our lives, because when we hope for something and the hope falls away, of course, it can leave a great vast space. But at the same time, I feel like in that space, exactly as you said, Alexandra, people are
Mm,
now compelled to really, if they can see through this, the mirage of all of it, if they can really recognize that the promise is unfulfilled, then they are coming to new ways of yearning to live out this life,
yeah.
with more freedom, with more awareness, with more of a commitment to really truly being present in our lives.
Right.
And I see the way in which Ayurveda and the Vedic traditions, but
Hmm.
many maps from indigenous cultures offer us this return to clear
Hmm.
sight. They offer that. So this
Right.
is one map that I've been inspired by, but there are many, and Ayurveda, meaning knowing life. Of course, it's not different than many of the other indigenous traditions
Mm.
that we see across the planet.
Is Ayurveda the oldest practiced?
This depends on who you ask, right? So some people in pride and in love for, some people will say it's one of the oldest medicines on the
Right.
planet. But I like to contemplate these things because
Yeah.
it's said that if we look at the texts, 5,000 or 7,000 years, these
Hmm.
texts have been in existence. But all of these traditions, not just Ayurveda, but like I was saying a moment ago, all of the indigenous wisdom traditions that considered, let's say, existence, that were existentially questioning. And part of that was medicine, quote unquote, because even
Hmm.
that word, like that Ayurveda is medicine, I think we immediately think for the physical body. So
Mm.
Ayurveda really has the intention, and it says this right in the very beginning, to provide beings with the recognition of who they are, for them to be free, for all beings to be free. This is the highest intent, moksha, liberation. So if
Mm.
we look to other indigenous traditions as well, wisdom traditions that offer medicine in various ways, medicine for the soul, but also
Hmm.
medicine emotionally, mentally, and also for this physicality, we
Hmm.
can see that prior to them being codified, they were all what I'd call osmotic traditions. They were all verbally, orally passed. So can we say that it's the oldest because, man has been questioning these things and sharing these things in
Right.
other ways that weren't codified, right? So whether or not we're talking about the First Nations traditions here, in
Right.
fact, or we're talking about the First Nations traditions of the Vedic lands,
Hmm.
it's very hard to say this, but some would say, oh yes, it's the oldest.
Right. So every continent has their own
Yes,
way of celebrating, or not even celebrating, but
yes,
having their own medicine or their own
yes.
wisdoms that they like to share with people. So what do you think happened in that period of, because there was, I'm not sure if people were not aware, but let's just say like the early, let's say 100 years ago, like that was not very well known
Yes.
here. Like, is this something that actually came to North America recently, or it has been a while, but it hasn't been practiced?
Yes. Ayurveda did start coming along with the entrance of yoga, making its
Mhm.
way to North America more. And in the mid 1800s, there was a gathering of world religions. And at that gathering, um, there was a being, a Swami, who really shared about the impact of, or the intention of Hinduism, yoga, of the Vedic tradition, let's say it in a wider understanding. And after that, we saw an entry point. There was like an entrance that started to happen and a welcoming. Of course, travel became easier and
Right.
globalization. So we also have globalized religions, globalized traditions. And now, of course, in the last 30 years, with this thing that you and I are using right now, we
Right.
have more sharing of information. People are moving across the globe, and to live, not just to travel anymore. So because of that, I've seen, especially in the last 10 years, Ayurveda is just skyrocketing in its sharing here in North American soil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful in many ways, Alexandra, that it's being shared. But what I can say is something similar to what I saw happening with yoga is happening with Ayurveda, that it's becoming diluted.
Mm,
Sometimes, through this form, this exact form, we just want to look up quickly. I even had it this morning. Someone said, what's good? They just wrote me, what's good? My niece or my nephew, 5 months old, has eczema. What's good to give them? And I
mm,
said, well, from an Ayurvedic context, from a perspective, I need to know the whole story. The whole story
right.
is required. We don't just look up on Google what's good for eczema and apply it on a 5-month-old child. We need to
Right.
know the story. We need to know the life, Ayurveda, to know the life. So it's
Right.
wonderful. It is increasing, like you said, last 100 years especially increasing. But
Mm-hmm.
may we really, really honor the roots and not dilute the depth of this tradition and what it has to offer us. Because when we dilute it,
Mm-hmm.
then it doesn't necessarily have the same depth of impact either. The profundity of impact is affected.
Mm, right. Yeah, I think this is, I think a lot of people still don't know. I mean, Google is great. Do your research and find out, but you said it right. Going to the roots, what really caused that eczema?
Yes.
Why is it happening? I mean, this could go back when the child was in the womb, right?
Yes.
What was the mother eating? What was
Yes.
happening? What was she on? Was she on antibiotic a lot? Like, there's a lot of question that needs to be asked.
Yes.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
giving something someone for a quick fix, it won't work. This is not
Yes.
the way Ayurveda or natural healing works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess this rapidity, this fastness is
Hmm.
something that has come along with the rapidity of everything in the last 100 years.
Right.
Now, rapid messaging, rapid entertainment, rapid food, right?
Right.
Everything is as fast
Right.
as we can have things, right down to we can even look at, our desirous tendencies. We can get
Mhm.
delivery in a minute, but we can also get pornography in a minute. You
Right.
see, everything has become so fast. And this is really contributing to the increase of
Right.
disease on a physical level, but also an emotional, mental level, because it is not natural to move this quickly. Now, is it becoming naturalized on some level? We could say yes,
Mhm.
but really returning to the slow, steadied, rhythmed pace that we see in nature.
Mm.
And so, in the same way, I would say exactly as you said, like the naturalness of really knowing, being able to know the story that's behind a certain manifestation of disease,
Mhm.
giving time and space is something that, an art that has been lost. Deep listening,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's something to consider for all of us.
Yeah. That's why when I get back from Nicaragua, I miss it. Why I miss it, it's the simplicity of life down there. It really makes you slow down, um, because that's the part of life. That's how they live their life down there,
Yes.
and just really makes you think. Like just being on the beach, for example, it really made you connect with yourself because there's nothing else to do except sit and watching the waves.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It was
Yes.
absolutely, um, for me personally, it was very, very liberating.
Yes.
I really enjoy that.
Yes.
So I'm
Absolutely.
back here and I'm trying to get my life back into, be like, oh,
Yes.
I notice how I speed up in certain things, or I notice that, for example, I'm standing up and I'm eating my lunch
Yes.
or my dinner, and I'm like, no, because I'm like, oh, I'm standing up, like I'm in the rush and I'm doing things. And I'm like, no, you got to sit down. You got
Yes.
to chew your food. you
Yes.
gotta really be intentional when you eat.
Yeah. Yes.
So I've been doing that
Mm.
again
Mm.
because I've noticed a couple of times I caught myself. I'm like, okay, no, slow
Yes.
down.
It's such
Big
a good
thing.
example, Alexandra. It's
Mm.
such a good example. Now we can, right, be driving in the car, listening to a
Yes,
podcast, eating our smoothie,
yes.
right, on video call with someone as a
Well,
meeting
talking
concludes.
about smoothie, that's my breakfast right here.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
But I'm not
Everything.
having it after when we finished our little
Yes.
conversation. I'll have my breakfast later. That's
Great.
okay.
Very good.
So, Tiffany, could you elaborate on the significance of your experience with Sri Raman Maharshi, I believe you say,
Oh, yes.
and the
Yes.
impact they had on your spiritual journey and teachings?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so Sri Ramana Maharshi, he passed in the 50s.
Mhm.
So I never had the opportunity because I'm not, Ayurveda isn't that great that I am currently, whatever it is, 70 years old or 80
Yeah.
or 90 years old. So I never had the blessed opportunity to meet him in the flesh.
Mhm.
But I went there in my early 20s on that journey, on that trip. I felt compelled to go. And when I say there, to go to the place where his ashram and where the caves where he lived and meditated and where the sacred mountain, which is called Arunachala, where this sacred mountain is. And, Alexandra, when I first went to India, I was maybe 23 and there was a sense of adventure like we all have
Mhm.
at that age, tend to have, right? At that age.
Right.
And so I would have said in many ways that life was wonderful and I was just going to discover. We're starting our lives to discover, to be in this place of adventure. That I would have also said that I was happy. All of those things would have been if people had have asked me. That's how I would have named
Mhm.
my experience at that time. And in going, I started to do some of these things also as a discovery. Like I attended the yoga course, as I told you, over a weekend, or some yoga classes with a beloved teacher there, who later became the Swami that I studied and continued to study and teach with for 12 years. And so, in the same way, I went for my first meditation retreat thinking, oh, this is just a place of discovery. 10 days, why not? 10 days in silence and let me come to this discovery also. Only to encounter and to find the deep cesspool of unhappiness that was living within my being,
Mm.
that was covered over by all of the strategies that we create even as young people to push
Mm.
aside, to repress trauma and the various things that we've each gone through in our life's
Mhm.
history and trajectory. And that was a reckoning moment because at such a young age, to start to see more the truth of my being and the
Mm.
truth of what I am not, and to see the formation of the personality and the ego at such a
Mm.
young age, it stopped the game in its tracks. It really stopped the game very early on of wanting to become an identified personality, of wanting to become a built ego. And really, it brought me to the deepest question of who am I? What is
Right.
this life for? And who am
Right.
I? Who am I truly if I'm not this one who comes to rise and pass in any given moment?
Mm.
And that drew me to also go to Tiruvannamalai and to meet in energy and to meet in presence Ramana Maharshi and the whole lineage. So at present, I have a living teacher from that lineage. So Ramana Maharshi had a student, and that student had a student. And so that student, his name and my present day teacher is Sri Muji Baba. And so that has inspired my life in endless ways. I mean,
Mm.
it's very, we would need a couple other moments together to be able to share, and I would love to do that. But the most simple thing I could say is that it inspires the absolute recognition of truth, of what is the
Mm.
most truthful, of who it is that we truly are.
Right.
And it wipes aside any kind of getting mired, getting tethered to the unimportant, to the untrue, to the
Mm,
unimportant. And with that, I guess I could say very, very simply, there's an emergent happiness.
mm,
Like the life becomes much more joyful. And I feel to cry actually when I share that with you, because I yearn for this for everyone.
mm.
You know, this is what ultimately I see, Alexandra, we are all longing for. And we have a whole host of strategies. And many of these strategies are so misguided, right? If I accumulate more things, if I become more successful, if
Yes.
I switch my job, my partner, the place where I live, there are so many ways in which we look to the outer circumstances to
Right.
be different or to consume. And we
We've
assume
been
that
programmed to do this.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that wiping clean, it's like, you know, wiping the windscreen clean and seeing the clarity of our own being. And there's a joy in that. So that has infused everything, right down to how I move in my daily life, to how I connect with other beings and friendships and my partnership. And, you know, it also has very much infused the way in which my businesses have emerged and what they're for, you know, why I'm in business, how I
Right.
carry that business, and how it's emerged. Because I never imagined I would be in business. So again, life's journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were talking about um, the truth. How can you define the concept of truth in the
Mm.
context of your teachings?
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a wonderful question. So there's a word in Sanskrit which is called satya, and satya means truthfulness. And it's one of the 10 advices or guidelines for what it is to really be aligned with life. And the root of satya is the word sat. So we didn't plan this conversation, and these things just arise, right? So if
Mhm.
you ask me this on another day, it might arise in a different way. But for now, this is the thread. So the root of this is sat, and sat means existence. It actually means pure existence or pure awareness.
Mhm.
So interesting. The root of satya, the root of truthfulness or truth is pure existence, pure awareness. And right there feels like the answer. When we are in pure existence or pure presence, pure awareness, we seem to be so anchored to the truth of the moment, the truth of life, the truth of our own hearts, the truth of
Mhm.
speech, the speech that moves through us. And I see it for myself, right? Like often, even in my partnership, my partner will say, if I'm trying to multitask, I'm trying to get something done for the business, answer a message or do something else, he'll say to me, I'll wait until you're truly, truly here,
Present. Yes.
truly present, truly here. Because then we can really commit to being in a space of communication that can emerge from life's asking.
Yeah.
And it's so much more inspired and it's so much more beautiful and it's true. And I think we all know that. I know that we all know that, in fact. We all know what it is to be true. It's
Oh,
our
I
very
love this.
essence.
I love this so much because we are so, and I'm generally speaking, that's including me as well, but I've been catching myself a lot. But I think we are so much in that we spoke a little bit earlier about this in such a fast pace of eating fast, driving and eating and listening to podcasts and doing things so quickly, you know, taking care of our children, and let's say our parents are getting older, so we have to be there and we're so all over the place that you're right, we forget to be present, for example, with our partners or with our children, where once we do that or whatever we're doing, we need to stop and show ourselves, be present. For example, for kids,
Yes.
you know, because it's easier, you know, let's say they're 7 years old or 8 years old or even 10 years old, and it's easier to be like, oh, I'll do it later, or we'll talk about it later. But then we forget and we don't attend these children. And it's like we're passing these information to these children that it's okay to do that, which is not, right? So
Yes.
I think you said it very beautifully of focusing what you have to focus and then be present for the
Mm.
other person or for
Yes.
whatever else you're doing. So that
Yeah,
was beautiful.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm a recovering multitasker. I don't know about you.
Mm.
Alexandra, but I think
Yes,
many of us have been taught that that's successful, and especially many women have been
yes,
taught that that's very successful. And so I see myself still to this day, the capacity that I have for multitasking and for getting many things done in one day
right,
has the edge has been pushed continuously from the time I was young, actually.
right.
But does it really contribute to my highest well-being and to that truth of presence and also to the surrounding sphere around me? And I just see as I become older, truly in this body, there's some wisdom that emerges from time. It
Yes,
really has a teacher, and just really the pace of slowing down, the gift that it is. And I'm still. That's an ongoing work. It's a work for me in my own humble self-medicating, like
hmm,
offering myself my own medicine. Is that I continuously try to orient the life in a way that I can slow it down,
right.
bring more pause, bring more rest.
Yeah. So tell me, how do you integrate nature and mindfulness into your teachings and daily life?
Yeah. Well, firstly, you see where I'm sitting.
Yes,
You see
it's
where
a
I'm sitting?
beautiful shala.
Yes. This place that a few years ago, I was traveling for many years teaching. So what happened after living in India for those years is I would still live between India and other places in South Asia and also South America. And I traveled a lot around three continents teaching for many years. And then we got this time of blessed stop point for all of us.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how blessed it was in all ways, but that was definitely a gift. Like we all had to stop for a moment. And what that led to was finding myself back here in Canada and saying, well, if I'm going to be in a pause, then I would like to be deeply rooted in nature. And through life's again mystery of offerings, I ended up in this beautiful place. They have this land and this shala, the Vichara shala, and this place where we can host people to come for retreats and classes. And the clinic is also here, and it also happens to be a space that was first lived in by dear friends of mine who were part of the same yoga community in Thailand and India. And so there's this beautiful carrying of ancestry, of the lineage, and it just came to be. It wasn't them that sold it, actually. So it's amazing how the story came to emerge. And so the way I integrate that is I really invite people to come here. I invite people to come. I live here myself now. Traveling as is increasing again, but in again a paced way that I feel is just right, where I can land and be here more often and feel the quietude of this space and really have my feet literally on the earth as often
Mhm.
as possible. We have trails right out from the Shala into the forests here. We have what's called the 100-acre woods right
Mm,
here. So we can be with the earth and the trees and the rock formations that are here, and the
yeah,
small mountain that we live on. The water is directly from the underwater source of the
mhm,
mountain. It's like artisanal water. It's amazing, the
yeah,
water. The first day I came here and I drank the water, I felt, wow, okay, here's the spring, the spring to be found.
yeah.
And and so I also invite people, and I felt this was important to have a small space, an intimate space, where I could also invite people to really feel the infusion of not just this place, but also this place, this geographical place,
Mhm.
which is one of real silence and healing, but also to offer opportunities through retreats and through healing treatments and through consultations, etc.,
Right.
where people could come to know themselves more deeply. So that's what we continue to do.
Mm, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
I'm so happy that you come and that you've been
Yeah.
here also,
It's
Alexandra, that we can share it.
it feels very inviting and very, very warm. Every time I leave, I feel just like the whole pressure, anxiety, whatever's happening in my body, it just literally leaves.
Oh, I'm
So
so
it's a
happy to
beautiful
know that.
place.
It touches me. That touches me
Thank
so
you.
much because I wouldn't have it otherwise. I mean, it's not,
Yes.
it's not for me, in fact. I could have a teeny tiny cabin. So,
Yes.
so it's not for me. It really was with the vision of sharing. and really with the deepest vision of sharing for this reason, for all of us to come to know ourselves
So thank you for
and to
sharing,
heal,
Faith.
to heal.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's a big thing right now for healing.
Yes.
Like we talked about earlier, people are searching for this, and whatever it is in their lives, they really want to heal and be better. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So thank you for
Yes.
sharing this space with us,
Thank
and
you.
looking forward actually to come and see you
Yes, very
soon.
good. Very good. Yeah, and I feel it's such an important, there are important things that we've gotten used to again and normalized
Yes.
that, even as I'm seeing like the logs behind me,
Mhm.
the spaces we live in, the amount of VOCs, the amount of chemicals, just even in the
Yes.
places that we live in, the off gassing that's happening. And I see all the builds going up all over the place. And it's like we have the wisdom now to build differently. We have the
Right.
wisdom now to live in smaller spaces if required, to live in coexistent spaces also.
Right.
Intergenerationality is also intergenerational living is also on the rise again. This is
Mhm.
wonderful to see, almost out of force. But also here in Canada, we have the benefit of so much nature. So
Yeah.
moving to nature, not just to the urban environments, because I see this increase of moving to the urban environment. And we can have the opportunity. We're afforded that opportunity here.
Hmm.
And so if we can find creative ways to also live in more natural spaces, I feel it's so, so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this will bring me to a question of how do you balance teachings of, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right, but it's Advaita Vedanta. So it's
Yes.
the non-duality with the practical aspect of Hatha yoga and Ayurveda in your offerings. Like
Yes.
how do you do that?
Yeah.
If you can share that.
This is an amazing question. And for those listening also, I don't know how potent we might all realize this question is until I start to share, because what Alexandra's asking, I see the potency and the importance in the following way. So often, Hatha Yoga and Ayurveda are seen as more bodily oriented practices. So things that bring healing to the body. But as I shared before, Ayurveda has the highest intention of freedom, to be free from ultimately what? To be free from the mind's samskaras, the mind's tendencies, to be free from the egoic patterning that causes us suffering. So the ways in which our identity and our persona really on and on in our habituation lead us to destruction and suffering. And similarly, Hatha Yoga is the same, but many of us today don't know this because of the dilution of Hatha Yoga. So all physical yoga is actually Hatha Yoga, but Hatha Yoga has become like a branch. It's become a branded branch, like people think it's just one type of slower, more gentle yoga. But
Mhm.
actually, every practice of yoga in the body is Hatha Yoga, in fact. And there'll be lots of people who might listen to this who will argue with me, and you can come and find me because I'll share with you where this is rooted in the origins of the text. I'm not saying in any way, or I'm not in any way defiling that there are
Yeah.
traditions and lineage names like Ashtanga or Iyengar, etc., but they are all Hatha Yoga practices, in fact.
Mhm.
So they fall under that, which Hatha Yoga means the balancing of the sun and the moon. Hatha, the sun and the moon. And what this means really, hatha, is because it becomes one word, that the duality that is lived in form, that it come to be one, hatha,
Mhm.
that we no longer be just the sun or the moon, just the right or the left, just the good or the bad,
Or the black and white.
or the
Hmm.
black and white. So ultimately, hatha yoga is an embodied practice of non-duality, because it says we are not so dual. We're not as dual as we think we are. Can we come back in this embodied practice to recognize the wholeness of our being, to feel the wholeness of our being in its embodiment, but also to feel it in the deepest parts of our being as well, to recognize that we are not these thoughts of up and down and all around. In fact, there is a silence that is one within our being. So in that way, Hatha Yoga and Ayurveda, even though they acknowledge that this body and this mind lives in a world of diversity and multiplicity. They also recognize that ultimately this body, mind, and this whole structure, this whole person and personality, it emerges from a singular source. It emerges from pure consciousness. And so it's not any different than Advaita Vedanta, which Advaita Vedanta also recognizes exactly this, because Advaita says it's a non-dual tradition. So it says, although there is all this multiplicity, I shouldn't be caught in just one or another of the phenomena that are around me. I am all of it, and I am also only one within it. I am the singularity from which it all emerges. And something beautiful that I come to see in our Hatha yoga practice, which we've come to name because people would ask me over the years, what's this yoga called? So funny, we want a name, right? I'm going to these other classes and they're called this type of yoga or that type of yoga. So eventually I said, okay, let's call it Vichara yoga. Because what I invite people to do is Vichara, to be an inquiry in the yoga practice, to not just do a fitness practice that looks like yoga, but
But
really you're
connecting.
thinking, yeah, just gymnastics, acrobatics, and you're thinking about other things to really be in the inquiry of who am I? So this is where Advaita, the non-duality, really meets the physical practice. Who am I? Am I all the phenomena that are going on in this body? Am I the one pain that I came in telling myself I was? Or am I all the different sensations that live here? And we even start to see, am I just this one aspect or quality of being? Like maybe I'm used to being a heartful person, a loving person. But what about the strength and the ferocity that lives here in the universe of me as well? Am I also that? You see, we live our lives, Alexandra, so often thinking that we are just a very small partiality. Like I'm like this, or I like that, or I do this. We often, the first question we ask each other when we meet each other is, what do you do? Amazing. It's the qualifier for our being,
Right.
what our employment is. Non-duality says we are everything and also nothing. There's something very powerful to this recognition. And it untethers us from being bound. It really gives us a freedom. Because then if you lose your job and you thought
Right.
that you were that job, if you lose that job, you realize I've always existed, whether or not I was a teacher,
Right.
or the marker, the label of teacher falls away. If I lose this body, which we all will eventually, I'm not this body, in fact. This
Right.
body goes through change. And women
Yes.
especially know this. This body goes through great change
Yes.
through the various transitions of this life. What if
Right.
I am so clinging on to this body that was 20 years old and looked a certain way? I'm no longer
Right.
that, non-duality. So it's a powerful recognition that we can come to. And all three of these, they all arise from the Vedas. So they all arise from the same mother source. And they have the same teaching, but they just have slightly different ways of bringing us to the recognition. There's slightly different emergent ways pathways that we could come to know ourselves more deeply. Does that help to answer the question?
That is absolutely beautiful answer. I'm in awe right now because I agree with you. We've been so programmed to think in certain way. And I
Yes.
think bringing the teachings like you are and really recognizing that we are not this. We are everything. And we can be anything we want to be in this life. So I
Yes.
really appreciate that answer. It was absolutely, yeah, wow.
Yes, and I appreciate the question. Like I said, like I
Yeah,
don't, there is a potency
yeah,
to this
yeah.
question because
It's
this
much
is the
deeper
true,
than, mhm.
yes. Yes, and this is the true name of this life game. Is like
Mhm.
really not getting knotted up
Yeah,
with the things that will fall away. They will necessarily fall away. And then where's your happiness? If those
right,
are the only indicators of our happiness and they fall away, oh goodness, that's when I start to see people, right? This is when the challenge comes. And that's always a wonderful thing that I'm seeing people, because this crisis of existentialism, or also the crises of a healing,
right.
can arise in that moment, because all of us, I would venture to say, have this longing to know who we are. We have this longing to be happy, which is synonymous with knowing who we are.
It's such an easy word, yet a lot of people have such a hard time
Yes,
with that
yes, yes,
because you
absolutely.
really have to look inside.
Yes.
So, what advice would you give to someone who is, for example, interested in deepening their awareness or through meditation or awakening, for example? Like, what would you give? What information would you give them?
Mm, yes. Well, usually when people come to me specifically to ask that, then I welcome them often to sit with me.
Mhm.
Like I welcome them to just sit for a moment and I guide them into a place of sitting presence. This is usually, what I welcome. But as we're reaching a wider lens of people um, through this sharing now, I would say one of the most beautiful ways that I would suggest to start this is to go to a place of silence. And I mean that twofold.
Mhm.
To find a place that really imbues silence for you. So, whether or not that's sitting in a forest or going somewhere nearby to water, a water body, and then to allow yourself to be internally silent, to really clearly watch the one who is incessantly in thinking,
Mhm.
constantly moving and thinking, and to notice where that is seen from, the one who watches that. And notice how that one who can watch all of the thinking go on and has watched it your entire life, has watched the thinking when you were 5 years old and when you were 20 and when you were 40. And that one has never remained, it has always remained clear and has never in any way got involved with that thinking. Just watched it, just watched you go on thinking. To spend more time in that silent one, the one who is this pure awareness, as we said before. And, you know, whether or not we think of that as information, it's not information out there, it's information in here. We all know how much we love to sit in nature, to be in nature. And there's a reason for it because it really reminds us of the silence of our being. So just taking those moments and then being more in that observer, that witnessing presence. And this can provide you with a whole host of information that already lives within you. It's like it's not needed externally. Now, external support is always helpful. This is why I created various things, courses, retreats. We have a membership program where there's a whole library of meditations on the back end of my membership program so people can do those guided meditations. There are
Mhm.
tons of guided meditations that are out there as well, of course. Some of them I would call true meditation, and some of
Mhm.
them are more like guided visualizations or affirmations. I don't know that
Right.
they're really true meditation. But for those of us really truly longing for it, just start with that simplicity because this affirms already that it doesn't need to be looked for elsewhere.
Mm.
That it's not another concept to be picked up for a while. It's not another technique to accumulate for a while. That really when we get deeply silent and we have to sit with ourselves and in nature, something starts to be seen. Something starts to be seen. And spending even 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I will invite people to do this. I currently spend some time, I'm sitting with an individual who's in the hospital after a stroke.
Mhm.
And this body has gone through great change for this individual. And there has been, in many ways, things that have been seen that have stopped the incessant mind that prioritizes things that it no longer needs to, right? When we go through a near death experience. And it's so powerful, such a powerful reflection for me because we do the best that we can. They sit in the chair, in the wheelchair. I sit on a hospital chair. And we just take a few moments to sit in the silence of our beings.
Mm.
And it's available. Very little information required. So I don't know if this helps to answer the
Yeah.
question, Alexandra, but I feel sometimes the simplicity, we make it very complex.
We are complex people.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
complex beings. We
Mm.
like complexity. We like
Yes.
chaos in our
Yes.
lives. We
Yes.
create our own anxiety, most of
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think I personally love the silence, and I know I threw my partner at your one day full on retreat. But it's so important to be connected. And for
Yes.
me too, once I feel that chaos going on within me, I don't live far away from you. And it's the same thing. I'll just walk up in the forest.
Yes.
I love personally, for example, touching a tree.
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
feel that energy coming
Yes.
from the tree. So for me, it's very important to be around trees. Water, the sound of water. It's another one for me as well, which we again live very close to the river.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, disconnecting and being with yourself and listening. Because that's another thing is we forgot how to listen
Oh,
to
totally.
um, our own selves.
Yes. Yes. And others. I mean, we even if we look now, I forget what the stats are, but the
Mhm.
capacity for us to intake information, it is steadily decreasing. They're
Yeah.
noticing this in universities and all schools of education.
Mm.
Uh, and in younger children as well, that our capacity to listen and retain is steadily decreasing. So, what
Yeah.
is this, right? Our capacity to listen to ourselves, of course, is also steadily decreasing. And nature rhythms our nervous systems.
Mm.
It's a co regulating, it's like we're co regulating with the Great Mother. So I find myself again and again suggesting this. And we're all spending more time, necessarily, it seems, in our contemporary world on these devices. And they have a potent place as well, like what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Wonderful, the sharing of information, the possibility. But there's
But,
also absolute garbage.
but don't abuse it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if we're spending more time around electromagnetic frequencies and, using of these
EMFs and all
devices,
that stuff. Absolutely.
absolutely. I suggest spending as much time in nature as possible. And it's one of my ongoing integrated meditations that I try to do daily is to walk, to just go and walk and enjoy the afforded possibility to be alive, to be part of this whole ecosystem. And that brings an immediate sense of gratitude and wonder. Like,
Mm.
okay, I saw yesterday on the trail as I was walking the dance that I was having, this conversation I was having with this squirrel. It was like coming and then going, and the things that go unnoticed, right? That we often, we're
Yeah.
just in too much of that rapidity again, as we said before, not listening, not truly seeing, not
Mm.
stopping so that the five senses can really, really absorb what it is to be here fully. And this is where presence emerges from.
Mm. That's beautiful. Yes. Modern day living is it's amazing, but at the same time it really, especially for children, like you mentioned
Yes,
before with all the technology, it
yes,
really puts them in the box and
yes,
they don't know what to do. And if you have, and again, I don't want to point fingers at anybody, but we tend to forget. And I know because we've done that with our own children. Again, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody
yes,
else. And we had to last week basically tell the kids, that's it, no more. We
yes,
took certain stuff away. And for example, from 4:30 till 8:30, there's zero
mm,
access to anything.
mm,
And it's like, you need to go outside. You need to,
yes,
even for a bike ride. Again, we live
yes,
in the country. Just do something. Because when I was growing up, this is what I was doing. We didn't
yes,
have access to internet. So what we did, my parents were like, okay, out. Don't come back till dinner.
yes,
So we have implemented
amazing.
this routine with the kids that that's it. Because again, you lose yourself in that moment where you're not being present, and then you forget that they're on these devices and they're playing these
Yes,
games, and it really pulls them in.
yes,
And we've noticed the frustration, the anger, because they're on it for such a long time that just how do you break that through? So we had the conversation, and you know what, they were great. There was a little bit of resistance from the oldest, but it was absolutely fine. Like this morning my youngest came in, he goes, Mom, It's been a week and a half. I hadn't had my VR, and I actually like it because he's been
Very
reading
good.
more. He's getting his books and he's creating. He's playing with his Legos again. You know what I mean? He's going on up on the bike and we live up in the quarry, so he goes up in the quarry. Like it's quite interesting to see the change in that
Yes.
child. Well, at least him. The oldest ones, they always do their own thing. But yeah, it's really, really amazing to see it.
This is amazing. Good for you, Alexandra,
Yeah,
because it really is. It's countercurrent right now. You know, it's
absolutely.
very against the flow of what's happening. I don't know if we can call it a flow, but there
Right.
is a real push of the river, you know, for
Yeah.
screen time and all of this. I even have started to question this with families and ask, you know, do you even want to use that terminology? Because now it becomes like an agreed upon thing in our culture. Like screen time is some kind of gift. So just like all of us, our neurotransmitters respond to our treat. So
Mm.
now screen time becomes like a treat rather than saying like, "Oh, tonight you're going to play your video game." Okay. Just, you know, that like rather than it's a thing, it's an ingrained thing. How much
Yeah.
screen time do I have in a day? I'm amazed by it, how much this has taken over. And I humbly say this without having children.
Mm.
Right? So
Yes,
good for you because I see that the struggle is really real. And
it
there
is.
are kids who will acknowledge and will say, I'm coming back to life, Mom. I'm coming back
Yeah.
to life.
Yeah. So I got goosebumps just talking
Yes,
about it.
yes, yes. Because imagine if more kids and more parents, and it will require some effort at the beginning because they have been really, really, this ingrained docility is here
Mm.
now. Like they are not as active, they are not as oriented towards
Yes.
movement as prior generations. So it's like a relearning, a reteaching. And at the
Yeah.
beginning, there's so much lethargy for these kids, right? So relearning how they can really enjoy
Yeah.
and
And be
uh,
kids.
and be kids,
Yeah.
absolutely. So good for you.
Thank you. So that brings me to last questions. Last question. How do you envision the future of your work in sharing the wisdom of meditation, yoga, and Ayurveda globally?
Mm. I have no idea. It's like you asked me about the journey at the beginning, Alexandra, in the same way.
Okay.
You know, I've never really felt inspired towards these plans, like 3 year, 5 year plans. I see the validity of them,
Mhm.
and maybe it's because I've always been quite self motivated in the moment, right? So that's been there. But also because my plans they never turned out. I mean, I know there is this age old adage, you know, you make plans and God laughs. But I felt like God particularly had this relationship of laughter with me. Like if there was a plan, it was not going to work out. And some of the most beautiful things that have emerged in this life, including the shala, for example, emerged within 4 days. I mean, this came within 4 days. There was no plan towards this. I really didn't have a plan either to establish in Canada, and it came. And for example, Rasa Ayurveda, my whole apothecary line of Ayurvedic products, which has become one of the largest and well known lines in Canada, it
Mhm.
was not a plan. It started from a seed. I was seeing people clinically in my clinic then in Ontario, and there just wasn't a good source of products. And so I would make people the medicine, the topical medicine for skincare. I would bring in things for their daily rituals and routines, the internal herbs that were to be used, etc.
Your teas
And
are amazing, by the way.
oh, thank you. Yours
Yeah.
are also.
Thank you.
and and then I said, okay, let's just create a little line for clinically, so my people have a line, and it just blew up from that point and continues to grow from there. So in that way, I love the question, like, what's the vision? But my vision, more than anything, is may this life really be of the greatest service.
Mm.
Like, may it be of the greatest service. And whatever way that life asks for this, and may I, in every way that I possibly can, share this wisdom for healing and awakening for the greatest number of beings. I mean, I feel
Mm.
so obligated in the best way. Alexandra. I feel so obligated. I have had amazing, blessed, beloved teachers, Vaidyas, which are Ayurvedic doctors and teachers in my life, master teachers. And I really have had the blessing of encountering wisdom at its most profound and highest. And I feel the storehouse that is here of those things that is ongoingly growing. It requires me to share, to be of service. That's what this life is for. And I guess in that light, I can share with you about 10 years ago now, my Ayurvedic Guruji, Dr. Vasant Lad, he said to me, he looked at me and he said, we were in a Gurukula process, which means we were with the Guru, 12 of us, for 6 weeks together in clinically and in India. And he said to me, Tiffany, now it's time. You have to open a clinic in Canada. Because I had been clinically seeing people around the world and opening kind of mobile. I had a mobile practice. So I would see people that would come for programs or at the retreat centers I was at. And he said, now it's time to open a clinic in Canada. And I said, oh my goodness, I feel like I still need to study more and deepen more. And he said, you will. And at this point on this planet, the knowledge that you have been given and the lineage of Ayurveda is one such that very, very few people have had this exposure, and it's required. It's your duty. It's your dharma. It's your service.
Mm.
And that blessing at that moment really formed its own vision. Like, okay, it's required. And I humbly entered in at the point then that I felt competent, which ongoingly grows because yes, now I'm in my doctorate. And
Right.
so the vision is to be of the highest service, to follow that thread continuously. That I feel so blessed by these teachings myself, and it would just be selfish to not share them as widely as possible. And that's why things emerge. Even when I feel a little bit weary, I feel like, okay, maybe I could just retreat into myself a little bit more. Then life, whatever we want to call it, life, the divine consciousness, God, seems to give me a whole new boost of energy to carry forward something new. So, it's beautiful to see how these things
Well, it's
are called.
beautiful to have you
Oh,
and be here with you and call you friend and
yes.
being here for the world because we do need people like you definitely coming and sharing your knowledge, um, experience, and healing. I think this is, as we were talking about earlier, is healing this planet, healing us, healing our children. That's very, very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for doing
You're
this work.
welcome.
This is dharmic work to really allow for a space like this in which people can have access. We never know the spark that this will set off
Yeah.
in people. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing
You're
this work
welcome.
also.
Thank you so much. So,
Mm.
how can people reach you, Tiffany?
Yes, so they can reach me in various ways. I have two websites. So there's one website that focuses a little bit more on upcoming retreats and the mentorship programs that I offer, and also our sadhana membership. So that's more yoga and meditation, which is Tiffany Nicholson-Smith.com. So that's that website. And then the other website that has more of our apothecary, our whole line of Ayurvedic products, is rasa-ayurveda.com. So those are two places. And of course, we're on social media and all those kinds of things as well, while trying to maintain balance within that.
Yes.
But they can reach me both on both of those sites. There's contact forums. You can reach me whether or not it's just to check in or for a consultation or to join an upcoming retreat or immersion or
Perfect.
program.
What I'll do is I'll definitely send all the information down below after the interview so people can access that too. So, yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Tiffany, it was absolutely
Thank you.
pleasure. I am so happy have you on and having that discussion. There was a lot of information, and I really hope that people will take this to heart and look in within themselves, finding that balance between the regular life and finding peace within themselves. So I
Mm.
really, really, truly appreciate you as a friend and as a healer yourself.
Oh, thank you so much, Alexandra. May it be so. May it be
Thank
so.
you.
Thank you.